I think it was 2 days ago, 3 days ago. We're talking about George Pickens being the most overrated or underappreciated member of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a guy that I think I could argue, and we named others as well, but George Pickens topped that list in my list, at least in my head. 48, 60 hours later, I don't know how long ago it was. He's been named the most overrated player on the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is what Pro Football Network said on George Pickens. Quote, surprise, another wide receiver from the 2022 NFL draft has landed on the list. It feels like we've been waiting an eternity for George Pickens to have a breakout season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yet he's only heading into his third NFL season. Following Russell Wilson's arrival in Pittsburgh, Pickens will be playing with easily the most talented quarterback he's had throwing to him at the next level. Now we'll wait and see if Pickens can finally put it all together on the field and live up to the hype. They continue. There's more here. Despite playing with multiple quarterbacks, Pickens, I don't know how that's an argument. Despite playing with multiple quarterbacks, Pickens still surpassed 1,000 yards for Pittsburgh in 2023. That production also came amid an offensive coordinator change. Most astonishing is that his average yards per catch skyrocketed to 18.1 in 23. First off, let's just address how all over the board this hot take is. Pickens is overrated. But also he had nobody throwing him the football and Matt Canada as his offensive coordinator, and he actually didn't play terrible by the end of the season. Doesn't make much sense to me. I'll say this. Anybody who's sitting around saying George Pickens is underrated is jumping the gun tremendously. Tremendously. There are a lot of players that you could say are overrated in the NFL. A ton of them. I don't know if I'd sit here and say any third-year player in the NFL is overrated. It's way too early in a career. If you were the number one pick in the draft, signed a massive deal heading into your third year, like Kyler Murray did a couple of years ago, and you didn't do nearly as much as people expected you to do, okay, yeah, we could have an overrated discussion. George Pickens has had almost no help at quarterback, negative help, hurtful help at offensive coordinator, and has still done, in my book, a pretty good job. 1,000 yards last season, 195-yard game as a wide receiver one with 2 touchdowns against the Bengals. 4, I believe, maybe 5 100-yard games in 2023. I don't know if overrated is the word. I get that he's got a ton of hype surrounding him. And after his rookie season, really after training camp, after he did what he could do in training camp his rookie year, we set these massive expectations for him. I think this is the first year that he gets an opportunity to show those expectations in an offense that works with him. Anybody who's watched the Steelers offense over the last couple of years and said, George Pickens, man, he's getting all the help in the world. They're just doing everything they can to help this guy, and he is hurting himself. Well, I don't think you were watching the same Steelers games that I was. So I'm not saying overrated. I think it's wild to toss him in that category. Agree, disagree? Am I overhyping maybe the overhype of the overrated list?
You 100% hit the nail on the head when you mentioned George Pickens' rookie, you could say training camp, you could say the first day of OTAs. This is what happens when the expectations skyrocket because you do as many impressive things as George Pickens did as a rookie in training camp before he even stepped foot onto an NFL field for a regular season game. And that's all this is, because all the stories came out, all of the clips came out, and the national media automatically said, you know what this is? This is a superstar in the making. And then they, fall out of it. They just look every once in a while. And then their take is when they look at the spreadsheets in July, because we're so far separated from the games, they say, oh, okay, George Pickens overrated. I can see how that is because he's never had a breakout season. This is his third year, and as you mentioned, his first year with actually a pretty good situation. I think the one thing that guy got right in his take is this is a big year to wait and see what he's able to do and if he can become a true top 10 in the NFL receiver, because I think the skill set is there, the ceiling is there. Now it's just time for him to put it all together.
Yeah, I agree. This is year 3. This is the big time. He's got a quarterback. He's got an offensive coordinator. He's got a system in place. He's comfortable with the NFL. He's had a 1,000-yard season, even with some rough quarterback play. It's all here. I agree 100%. This is year 3. This is the big one. Step up. become a superstar. And I think he's got all the expectations to do so. I have a hard time sitting around, and maybe that's not the point of this story. Maybe they didn't toss it out there to say George Pickens isn't going to live up to the hype. But if you label somebody overrated, it sounds like they're not going to live up to the hype. I look at George Pickens as a guy that I expect to exceed. I expect to have a big year in Pittsburgh this season, unless everything goes to hell. If you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and at the end of 2024, the running game sucks, the quarterback play sucks, Arthur Smith sucks, the receiving game sucks, everybody, you just got a clean house. Okay, then I expect all of that. But I don't expect George Pickens to be the piece of the puzzle that, or the piece of the offense that you're looking at going, that guy didn't live up to the expectations. That guy stunk in 2024. There are a lot of candidates in Pittsburgh to not be the guy that they're expected to be. And maybe George Pickens is one of those candidates. I have a hard time believing he's going to be somebody who doesn't live up to the hype. Even without a wide receiver too, even without any help, I still think George is a guy that this offense relies on so much so that he does have a good year and is able to do a lot of things. It just feels like this list is like, George isn't going to do it, man. This is the fall off year. This is the end of George Pickens. If George Pickens is 1,200-yard receiver with 5-6 touchdowns, that's a good year. That's a good, maybe in George Pickens standards, that's not a good year. In NFL standards, that's pretty good. And I don't know, overrated. Wild take in my eyes. Wild way to start off this morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I have a question for you. Then this is because it kind of feels like another guy on the Steelers offense that we typically have conversations about is one day there's a story or a take that he's really good, and next day there's a story or a take that he's overrated. I think the big question here is who's more polarizing on the Steelers offense, George Pickens or Najee Harris?
Oh, Najee Harris, I think. It's Najee Harris.
But
I think it's Najee Harris.
Comparable though.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. And Deontay Johnson was the guy before that. He was the worst of the three because there are select guys, and I hope George is not. George is not in the fan base. In the fan base's side of things, it is not you have to defend George Pickens. Steelers fans know that George Pickens is George Pickens. He is the guy. You have other guys that, especially in the George is in the national media, Najee's in the national media, where just like you said, polarizing. They are a name that one day, this guy's phenomenal. Another day, this guy stinks. He averages 3.5 yards a carry. Who cares if he gets 1,000 yards? It's like, yeah, all right. He also led the league in explosive runs last season, but we'll just ignore that fact. George is putting himself in that list. That's all right though, because Steelers Nation is. You get a guy like that, they're going to defend him. And that's, it's Steelers Nation versus the world in the George Pickens war. And I think Steelers Nation is going to come out on top. And I think George Pickens is going to help that. I think he's going to help that cause by going off and having a great year. Yeah, he's definitely added himself to that list. It's unfortunate because I think George is going to be a monster this season. And at some point, we'll embrace that George is just going to be a monster. It's 100% there.